Welcome to Outbreak Brief, the podcast that takes you inside the world's most dangerous infections.
Today we're tracking what is honestly a master of disguise.
Right, we are looking at a pathogen that masquerades as this harmless, almost cheerfully colorful childhood rash, but it actually harbors a really dark, life-threatening alter ego.
Yeah, for the most vulnerable among us, it's capable of completely halting the human body's ability to produce life-sustaining blood.
It's wild.
Yeah.
We're talking about Parvovirus B19. And for you listening, this virus is going to challenge everything you think you know about how infections work.
It really does operate entirely on contradictions. I mean, it's mild for the many, but absolutely catastrophic for a specific few. It's a virus that can, move completely silently through a community and only ring the visual alarm bell after the fire has already burned itself out.
Okay, so picture this. It's late spring, right? You're looking into a classic elementary school classroom. Kids are working at their desks, maybe if you're sniffing, typical spring stuff.
Right, exactly.
But then you see this one child sitting in the second row, and they have these bright, glowing red cheeks.
Like they've literally just been forcefully slapped across the face.
Yeah, exactly. And it looks incredibly alarming to the teacher. But if you ask the child how they feel perfectly fine.
No fever, no cough, just those glowing red cheeks.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Great.
Because here's the absolute paradox of this disease. By the time this dramatic rash appears on that child's face, they are completely 100% non-contagious.
Yeah, the visual evidence we rely on it's completely decoupled from the actual threat. The true danger in that classroom actually occurred a week prior.
Nobody knew anything was wrong.
Right. That child was shedding the virus into the air when they just had like a mild, non-specific sniffle.
Wow.
And for a pregnant teacher in that room, or maybe a classmate sitting nearby with a hidden blood disorder who breathed in that invisible viral shed, a ticking clock started long before anyone even knew the virus was in the room.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive into the latest CDC data and the StatPearl's clinical guidelines, we're going to uncover how this strict human pathogen operates.
We'll also explore why it surged so dramatically post-pandemic and how it specifically targets our very lifeblood.
Right. And to understand why this virus is a ticking time bomb for some people, we really first need to look at its biological blueprint.
Yeah, let's talk biology. Because Parvovirus B19 is tiny. I mean, practically microscopic, even by viral standards.
We are talking about a tiny, single-stranded linear DNA genome of just 5.6 kilobases, right?
Exactly. And it belongs to a very specific genus, erythroparvovirus.
Which, I mean, the name kind of gives away the plot there.
It does. What's fascinating here is that erythro means red. This virus, it doesn't waste energy trying to infect lung tissue or, muscle cells. It has strict human tropism.
Meaning it only infects humans, it won't jump to your dog.
Right, no animal transmission. It only knows how to pick one highly specific cellular lock, which is the P antigen, also known as globoside.
And where exactly is this lock found?
Almost exclusively on rapidly dividing erythroid progenitor cells.
So the factories in the bone marrow that are actively pumping out new red blood cells.
Precisely. You see, because the virus is so incredibly small, it doesn't pack its own replication machinery.
So it can't survive on its own.
No, it's an obligate parasite. It has to hijack a factory that's already actively running, so it enters the bloodstream, completely bypasses the rest of the body, and makes a beeline straight into the bone marrow to take over the red blood cell production line.
That's just wild. We will get to the clinical emergencies that cause this in a minute, but I really want to trace the history and the origin of this first. Because historically, you might know this virus by its most famous moniker, which is fifth disease.
Right, erythema infectiosum. It got that name simply because historically it was the fifth of the classic childhood rash-causing diseases identified by doctors.
Right, falling in line behind like measles, scarlet fever, rubella, and Duke's disease.
Exactly. And for decades, this virus has operated on a highly predictable rhythm. It caused these cyclical mini outbreaks every 3 to 4 years in temperate climates.
Usually peaking right around late winter and early summer.
Yep. But if you look at the 2024 and 2025 CDC data, that predictable rhythm has completely shattered. We are seeing a massive, really alarming surge.
Which is what I want to ask about. I mean, if this has been cycling through humanity for decades, why are we seeing such a massive, alarming surge right now in 2024 and 2025?
2 words, immunity debt.
Ah, right. From the pandemic?
Exactly. During the early years of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, public health measures like social distancing, masks, prolonged school closures, they were incredibly effective at halting respiratory spread across the board.
But by halting all respiratory spread, we disrupted the natural 3 to 4 year cycle of Parvovirus B19.
We did. Millions of kids who would have naturally caught the virus and developed mild lifelong immunity simply didn't. This created this massive, unnatural pool of susceptible humans gathering over several years.
A huge generational blind spot in our collective immune system.
Exactly. So once society reopened, the virus didn't just return, it rebounded with a vengeance, sweeping through this immense, vulnerable population.
And it caused a really substantial increase in severe health outcomes. Which leads us to how it capitalized on this immunity debt so quickly. It's all through its incredibly deceptive method of transmission.
Yeah, let's break down the spread. It's primarily through respiratory secretions, so close contact, coughing, sharing air. But it can also spread parenterally through blood products and vertically from a mother to her fetus.
Okay, so let's track the timeline of this stealth phase. Because the timing is what makes it so dangerous. You get exposed, and the incubation kicks off.
Right, and then about 5 to 10 days post-exposure, you enter the viremia phase. This is when the virus is actively multiplying the blood.
And how does the patient feel during this phase?
Usually just vaguely flu-like. You might have a low-grade fever, some malaise, maybe a headache. But here's the kicker. This is when you are highly contagious.
You are shedding staggering amounts of the virus.
Exactly.
Okay, but wait, I'm stuck on the timing here. Because the famous slap cheek rash doesn't appear until about 16 to 17 days after exposure.
Right.
That coincides with the body finally producing IgG antibodies. So if the rash is just the immune system cleaning up the mess over 2 weeks later, the patient isn't contagious anymore.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's totally wild. The rash isn't actually the virus damaging the skin at all. It's the aftermath. It's the immune complexes forming as the body wins the fight.
So by the time that bright red rash is visible, the viral shedding has completely stopped.
Completely. The patient is a ghost. The threat has already moved on to someone else. Sending a kid home because of slap cheeks is honestly, it's like putting up crime scene tape 3 days after the burglar has left the state.
That is such a great analogy. And because the virus spreads before anyone knows it's there, we really have to look closely at who is secretly in the crosshairs.
Yeah, because the CDC notes that roughly 1 in 4 infected people have absolutely 0 symptoms, and healthy kids bounce back easily.
But there are 3 specific groups that face truly terrifying outcomes.
Right. Yes. People with chronic hemolytic anemias, like sickle cell disease, hereditary spherocytosis, or thalassemia. Also, immunocompromised individuals, so HIV patients, leukemia patients, transplant recipients.
And the third group is pregnant women, specifically before 20 weeks of gestation.
Right.
So help me understand this. Why does a simple rash virus cause life-threatening emergencies for someone with, say, sickle cell disease?
Okay, so remember how we said the virus targets the bone marrow and hits pause on red blood cell production for about 7 to 10 days?
Yeah, it causes an aplastic crisis.
Right. Now, for a healthy person, a red blood cell lives for about 120 days, so a 10-day pause in production is nothing. You don't even notice it.
It's like missing a single grocery run when your pantry is fully stocked. You just coast on your reserves.
That's a perfect way to put it. But for someone whose red blood cells are fragile and die quickly, like in sickle cell disease, they don't have a stocked pantry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this pause leads to acute erythroblastopenia. It's a sudden, catastrophic drop in their blood count.
Because they're losing their oxygen-carrying capacity so rapidly.
Exactly. Their organs literally begin to starve, which can trigger congestive heart failure and a massive crisis.
That is terrifying. So what are the actual signs and symptoms we need to be looking for? We talked about the biphasic illness in kids.
Right. It starts with that headache, muscle aches, low-grade fever, and then comes the slap cheek. But a key detail here, it notably spares the nose and mouth.
Ah, creating that ring of pale skin around the mouth.
Yes, puerperal pallor. And following the cheeks, kids often develop this lacy reticular rash on their arms and legs.
And a frustrating quirk of this rash is that it can flare up for weeks, right? When the kid takes a hot bath or goes out in the sunlight or even gets stressed out.
Yeah, the immune response just keeps overreacting to environmental triggers long after the virus is gone. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, tell me.
If you look at the adult presentation, especially in adult women, that classic facial rash often never appears at all.
Wait, really? No slap cheeks?
Usually no. Instead, up to 80% of infected adults experience severe symmetric polyarthropathy.
Oh, meaning sudden, intense pain and swelling in the small joints. The hands, wrists, knees.
Exactly. It mimics the early stages of rheumatoid arthritis so closely that it's routinely misdiagnosed in clinics.
Wow. But there is one exception to the rule we established earlier, isn't there? About the rash just being an aftermath.
Yes, there's a condition called papular purpuric gloves and socks syndrome, or PPGSS.
That is quite the name.
It is. It happens mostly in young adults. They get these painful, extremely itchy petechial rashes, basically tiny burst blood vessels, exclusively on their hands and feet.
Literally where gloves and socks would be. And they get erosions in their mouths, too.
Right. But crucially, unlike classic foot disease, PPGSS happens during the active viremic phase.
Meaning these adult patients are highly contagious while the rash is visible on their hands and feet.
Exactly. It's a complete inversion of the standard pediatric guidance.
Okay, so with such severe joint pain in adults and potential organ failure in the vulnerable groups, how do we stop the virus once it's inside? Let's talk treatment.
The blunt truth is we cannot kill this virus. We have no antivirals for it. Treatment is entirely supportive.
So for the joint pain in adults, it's just NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, to manage the inflammation.
Pretty much. But for the vulnerable, those in an aplastic crisis medicine literally becomes a race against time.
Right, because their bone marrow has stopped working.
Exactly. So the patient requires emergency red blood cell transfusions. We basically have to manually keep their oxygen carrying capacity up until their bone marrow reboots.
And what about the immunocompromised patients, the ones who can't mount an antibody response to clear the virus?
For them, we use IV intravenous immunoglobulin.
Which is a specialized therapy, right? It transfers passive antibodies from healthy donors to the patient.
Right. It helps reduce the viral load and rescues their suppressed bone marrow. It's a lifesaver for them.
But since IV's a temporary fix, that brings us to the defense pipeline. Why don't we have a vaccine for Parvovirus B19?
Well, there is currently no vaccine available. The attempts to make one ran into issues where the vaccine itself caused adverse inflammatory responses, so research kind of stalled out.
But there is a silver lining with natural immunity,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. If an immunocompetent person catches it, they develop lifelong immunity. By age 70, over 85% of the population has these protective IgG antibodies.
Okay, but I have a critical pushback here.
Sure.
We talked about how dangerous it is for fetuses causing hydrops fetalis, which is massive fluid accumulation, and fetal heart failure.
Yeah.
If it's that dangerous, why isn't this virus on standard preconception screening panels?
It's a great question, but we have to look at the calm context here. While the emotional weight of fetal loss is undeniably heavy, the overall statistical risk of fetal death if a mother is infected remains very low, only about 2% to 6%.
So the vast majority of infants are born completely asymptomatic and at term.
Exactly. The severe outcomes are rare, so universal screening isn't recommended.
Which leads us to the prevention and infection control side of things. And honestly, this creates one of the most bizarre public health policy paradoxes out there.
Oh, the school protocols.
Yes, a child with a dramatic slap cheek rash
Yeah.
can and should be sent to school. They're perfectly safe to be around.
Because they aren't contagious anymore.
Right. But an adult with the gloves and socks syndrome must be strictly isolated from pregnant women and immunocompromised coworkers.
Because they are contagious. Yeah, preventing disaster requires this massive interprofessional web.
All right, you need pediatricians spotting the community outbreaks early on.
You need public health officials tracking the epidemiological data, and you need obstetricians and hematologists putting a protective shield around their high-risk patients.
Heightened surveillance, strict hand hygiene, environmental controls.
Exactly.
So where are we now globally? Pulling from recent CDC MMWR reports, we are currently analyzing the aftermath of this resolved but heavily impactful 2024-2025 surge.
Yeah, the data is staggering. Central Europe saw up to a 6-fold higher incidence than the United States.
Wow.
But even in the U.S., this surge directly translated into an alarming spike in aplastic crises among children with sickle cell disease. And we saw a rise in severe infections in pregnant persons.
It really serves as a stark reminder of the virus's ever-present threat. Which brings us to the future. What does the future hold if we don't have a vaccine?
This raises an important question, and honestly, the most incredible advancements are happening right now in maternal-fetal medicine.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, doctors are now using high-resolution serial ultrasounds to detect fetal anemia incredibly early.
If they detect it?
They perform miraculous intrauterine blood transfusions.
Wait, they are giving blood to a fetus while it is still inside the womb.
Yes, they are actively reversing fetal heart failure before the baby is even born. Furthermore, exploring IVG as a non-invasive alternative holds massive promise for the future.
That is just incredible. So what does this all mean for you? When you reflect on the story of Parvovirus B19, you really see this delicate, invisible ecosystem of childhood viruses.
Yeah, we disrupted that entire ecosystem.
Exactly. By shielding ourselves from one massive threat during the pandemic, we inadvertently rolled out the red carpet for another.
It's the law of unintended consequences.
It really is. So as we move further into a post-pandemic world, it leaves us with this final thought. How many other mild historical pathogens are quietly gathering strength in the shadows of our collective immunity debt, just waiting for their 3 to 4 year cycle to strike?
It's something we definitely need to be watching.
Absolutely. Stay informed, stay prepared. This is an Outbreak Brief.